Cimoooooooo.
What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. So today I'm bringing to you my top 5 meta decks for the September 2020 format. A lot of you guys were wondering where this video was, and I knew we were getting a ban list in September, so it really didn't make sense to release this video until after we saw the ban list. Now, to be fair, this is going to be more of a speculative top 5 because we're not really going to know until we start to get some events under our belt to see what the meta is going to be shaping up, but there's obviously some decks that are better than others, so that's what we're going to be discussing today. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. So kicking things off with number 5, we have everyone's favorite colossal monstrosity, and that deck is Dinosaur. Dinosaur, I don't think is going anywhere anytime soon. This deck suffered 0 hits from the most recent September Forbidden and Limited list, and I guess you could maybe argue some of like the tuner hits for Halqifibrax did impact this deck if you're playing some sort of like synchro Dino version, which I know does technically exist, but Dino can function perfectly fine without it. Dino is just so cool to me because it's able to function independently out of like every other deck in the format. It doesn't matter what the opponent's doing. Dinosaur can typically find a way to out it just because its cards are so unique and so powerful. When you have cards like Lost World that are able to just set you up so powerful in tandem with cards like Soul Eating Oviraptor, when you have a card like Ultimate Conductor Tyranno, which is then able to just so easily clear opponents' boards in ways that no other deck really has access to doing. One thing with Dinosaur is that Dinosaur, I feel like, kind of got buffed by this ban list because Called by the Grave actually went to 1, and with the loss of Called by the Grave, it actually makes it a little bit easier for Dinosaur to kind of resolve and do what it wants to do, because that means that your cards like Baby Sarosaurus aren't going to get hit out of the graveyard. Cards like Miscellaneousaurus, you're going to ensure resolve. There's so many different things that the graveyard and the effects in the graveyard did kind of matter for a deck like Dinosaur, and now with Called by the Grave to 1, you're going to be seeing that a lot less frequently. Dinosaur is one of the most aggressive decks in the format. It is able to go first or second depending on how you build it, and even how you adapt it with your side deck games 2 and 3. The deck is just incredible, and so for those reasons, that's why I gave it my number 5 slot. But coming in at number 4, this deck is on a crusade to be able to prove its worth in this format. I think it did a pretty good job last format, but it's going to be fighting for the top this time around, that's for sure, and that deck is Dogmatica. So when it comes to Dogmatica, there's so many different variants of Dogmatica, right? You have Invoke Dogmatica, Shaddoll Dogmatica, so like it's really hard to pinpoint a specific version. I think if I had to pick one, probably Invoke Dogmatica would be in this category, but I think some variant of Dogmatica is going to break away from the pack and really be able to lead the rest of this format. Dogmatica is so great because the engine is so splashable, right? It allows for a lot of flexibility because the cards aren't necessarily xenophobic and don't preclude you from playing other options. So there is some experimentation to be had here, and when some players are going to figure out some winning formula, that could be the key to success. Dogmatica is so cool because it uses the extra deck in a way that no other deck really has ever done before, by being able to send cards like Elder Entity Intis to the graveyard to be able to get extra pops. Its main fusion, Titaniclad, allows you to just search. One single Ecclesia essentially ends in 3 disruptions, so that alone right there screams broken to me, and I feel like some deck is going to take advantage of that, whether it's like a pure Dogmatica build, an Invoke Dogmatica build, or something along those lines, because that just seems too powerful not to take advantage of. The deck is relatively consistent. The deck has so many positives. While the deck doesn't necessarily take advantage of a card like Crystron Halqifibrax by itself, it definitely relies on another strategy to synergize with to be able to get the maximum value there. That doesn't mean there isn't potential. Halqifibrax is obviously a game-breaking card, and then also the fact that Red Ice Dark Dragoon exists in the format. There's so many easy ways to access that and then use the Dogmatica to supplement the rest of your strategy, and so the engine's just too good not to play, and some decks going to take advantage of it. So that's why I gave Dogmatica my number 4 slot. Now coming in at number 3, we are going to turn up the heat because again, this deck suffered no hits on the September 2020 ban list. I guess you could maybe argue the Halqifibrax tuners, but that's debatable. But that deck is Infernoblade Knight. Infernoblade Knight was already sitting at a pretty solid tier 2 of the last format, but the thing is, with a deck like Adamancipator just running rampant, it was really hard to justify playing Infernoblade Knight over Adamancipator when Adamancipator was arguably just the better combo deck. And so now that Adamantipator is gone because Block Dragon is banned, although, you know, we might still see a little bit of that, Infernoblade Knight now has its opportunity to shine. Being able to do the things that Infernoblade Knight was already able to do, like hand loop cards out of your opponent's hand with Smoke Grenade, be able to set up a multiple negation board with Borreload Savage Dragon, Charles, and all the other crazy shenanigans that the deck is capable of doing. It can also play through hand traps reasonably well as well, because you have cards like Neo Space Connector to kind of rip them out before you combo off. You have a ton of means to do so, but the thing is, yes, even though Halki Fibrax did lose some of its tuner support in the form of Jet Synchron and Mecha Phantom Beast O-Line, it doesn't matter because you can easily replace those with a myriad of other cards, and you're still able to combo off with ease and essentially end on the exact same end boards that you're able to before. You might just have to jump through a bit more hoops comparatively. So Infernoblade Knight, I don't think is going anywhere. If anything, this is going to give players the opportunity to explore Infernoblade Knight and actually give it a fair chance, because again, it was kind of hard to justify that when Adamantipator was just obscenely broken by comparison. And so I'm really excited to see what people do with it. People are probably going to get sick of getting smoke grenaded after a few weeks, but we'll have to see how it plays out. But for those reasons, that's why I have Infernoblade Knight in my number 3 spot. But coming in at number 2, the future is definitely golden with this deck still around, because this deck is not going anywhere anytime soon, and that deck is Eldritch. You know, when it comes to Eldritch, I don't really know which variant of Eldritch is going to break away, because there's so many viable variants. I mean, I think the combo variant is still heavily viable, even though Jet Synchron's hit was probably most aimed towards combo Eldritch at the very least. But the thing is, there's like 10 other cards that are effectively Jet Synchron in what they do, so you could replace them. Yeah, they may not be as good, but I think they're still very viable options that allow you to just keep going with combo Eldritch and essentially establish those same end boards that you were able to before. Even just stun Eldritch by itself is still a very strong deck. That was where we saw Eldritch initially, but obviously that didn't take long to amalgamize into some other variants, such as Invoked Eldritch. You know, Invoked Eldritch is still a decent pick too. Dogmatica Eldritch is also another option. You know, that could be the better way for the deck to go forward now if people don't feel like the combo variant is as strong. But some people are playing Synchro Dogmatica Eldritch and it was working just fine, so we'll just have to see what people come up with. The thing is, when it comes to Eldritch, as long as Halki Fibrax and as long as Link Cross are legal, people are going to go to the ends of the earth to find every single way imaginable to be able to abuse these cards into oblivion. And paired with an engine like the Eldritch cards, you are going to have a perfect harmony in a single deck. There's a reason that this was one of the most popular decks of the previous format, and that's just because it was absolutely absurd in terms of how powerful that it was. When you have this half combo, half control hybrid deck that really doesn't have a particular identity and can play both the short game and the long game depending on what you're wanting to do, I mean, it was just an absolutely crazy deck, and really is one of the reasons why it is still at the top of this list. When you have your Eldritch cards and your Synchro package with your Dogmatica cards, the three just meld together so beautifully, and people are really going to find every way possible to be able to play this deck. And even as a last resort, if you have to take a step back and play like Dogmatica Eldritch, that deck is still pretty damn good as well. So that deck is still going to be seeing tons of play, I guarantee it. So for those reasons, that's why I have Eldritch in all of its forms as my number 2 slot. Now, before we get to my number 1 pick, I did have an honorable mention because this deck is just ripe with so much potential, and that deck is Burning Abyss. Graph and Seer are back at 2, and Tour Guide is at 3. And with Phantom Rage right around the corner to bring a whole new arsenal of Phantom Knight support, we have Rusty Bardish back as well. Like, PK Fire is looking so incredible, and this is such a powerful deck. When you have cards like Red Eyes Dark Dragoon and Rusty Bardish that are essentially able to turn any summon of Cherubini into like 3 to 4 negations, you have to respect that to some degree. Burning Abyss is relentless. It's one of the most recursive decks ever. It is able to take advantage of so many different things. It doesn't really fold to hand traps necessarily, and I just have this feeling that even after we get the support in Phantom Rage, maybe even prior to that, we'll just have to see that people are going to find a way to make this deck work. Now, will Burning Abyss be at the top tiers of competitive play? Time will tell, but I think this deck has so much potential that there could be a way to make it work. But that's going to bring us to my number 1 meta deck of the September September 2020 format. And if you haven't already figured it out, we're going with Dragon Link. Yes, Dragon Link, yet another deck that incurred no hits on the September 2020 ban list. And I think that is just crazy. This deck was already at the top tier, and now the fact that it suffered no hits, and now that Emancipator's been knocked down a peg, this deck has the best opportunity of all decks we've discussed to be able to shine as the best deck of the format. Dragon Link's 1 and 2 card combos are insane, and sometimes can just be able to play through so many different forms of disruption just because of the way the cards interact with one another, and being able to end on a multi-negate board. Again, even with Halki Fibrax's tuners being banned, it doesn't even matter because there's adequate substitutes for them, and Dragon Link doesn't necessarily care. Dragon Link has been able to play through so many different forms of disruption even before this ban list, so how can you imagine it's going to be now that Emancipator's been knocked out of the equation? Dragon Link is probably going to be the go-to combo deck for players to explore. What makes Dragon Link so powerful is not only is it able to end on multi-negate boards going first, that also can be backed up by a Dragon Buster Destruction Sword to also lock your opponent out of the extra deck, because Dragon Link just happens to be comprised of dark monsters as well. But even if it's going second, it can OTK so easily because it can easily access a card like Borosword Dragon and be able to OTK through whatever board your opponent puts up. Now, there is an argument to be made that some of these combo decks were hindered by the fact that Call by the Grave went to a lone copy, but the thing is, some of these decks were just cutting Call by the Grave because they'd rather play more extenders that wouldn't stop the opponent's hand traps, but would allow them to continue comboing off, because it's better to have a card that's going to help you combo than a card that's going to slow down your opponent. And so by subscribing to that philosophy, it's kind of been able to rein in a new era of combo decks that are just so focused on getting to that end board at all costs, or so focused on being able to OTK. The more combo pieces you have, the higher the probability you're going to see them, and that means that you're either going to achieve that win condition of that turn 1 board that your opponent most likely won't be able to break, or you're going to be going second and be able to achieve that OTK that your opponent doesn't get a second turn. I am genuinely astonished that this deck received no hits on the ban list. Like, this deck is frightening. This deck is just so terrifying on so many levels, and this might be the new deck to beat of the format. And so for those reasons, that's why I put Dragon Link as my #1 slot. So guys, that's going to wrap it up for the video. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about your top meta decks going into the September 2020 format. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. And if you found this video informative, consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member. Just by showing your support in any way that you can, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.